Yo, what's up, guys? It's Benny. I happen to be at an airport right now reading this horrifying report from TMZ about a FBI cover-up of the fifth plane and potentially more planes that were intended to be used as weapons on 9/11. This is a crazy story where TMZ goes super into depth with the members of a crew that effectively said we were a target. Very mysterious things happening on our plane. Thank God we didn't actually take off, but we were about to be the fifth plane. And they have some unbelievable evidence that seems to have been part of a massive federal cover-up. When will we learn the full story about what happened on that day? Let's begin. Here are the flight attendants and the pilot talking about very suspicious passengers in the first class.
My name is Deborah, and I was a purser on Flight 23, September 11th, 2001. I had 4 people board the aircraft in first class. I knew that the people did not eat meat, so I spent a great deal of time trying to get these 4 people fruit plates.
The plane was not full. Relatively few people in business and economy, and only 4 people in first.
It was a taller, well-built gentleman in a tan suit. A young boy about 6 to 7 years old, a woman in a hijab, and a gentleman that appeared to be a type of bodyguard.
My name is Sandy Thorngren. I was a flight attendant on Flight 23 on September 11th, 2001. I was working in the business galley. I had gotten out, walked down the aisleway going up to first class, and I noticed there were 4 people in first class. What struck me at that time was there was a woman wearing a burqa. I figured it was a woman because that's who wears that. The opening of the headdress was very tight, and you could barely see his eyes. I did explain to our purser that I thought that wasn't a woman, it was actually a man.
I was absolutely convinced it was a man. Absolutely. There was no doubt in my mind.
It was a man, and I could tell by the size of his hands. He had hair on his hands. It was definitely a male underneath that burqa.
Now, the flight was at JFK, and when the first plane hit the tower, they stopped the entire flight patterns and no plane took off. And so this plane was grounded, but it was about to take off. And the pilot was alerted to very suspicious things happening inside of the cockpit. Get a load of this.
My name's Edward Ballinger. I'm an aircraft flight dispatcher for United Airlines. So my job was to get the airplanes for my company safely to their destination. I sent a group message to all my flights in the air. Beware cockpit intrusion. And every airplane got that message.
Carol and I looked at each other, and that's when we started getting a sense that something was seriously wrong and that somebody might be making a threat against the airplane. We used our suitcases and wedged them between the door into the cockpit and a bulkhead, so that basically the only way anybody can get in the cockpit from that point out would be literally to break the door down. We have a couple items in the cockpit that we could use as weapons. One is a fire extinguisher, which I gave to Carol, and I said, if somebody does break through that door, hit him in the face with it. We also have a crash axe for ripping out panels in case of a fire. and I was going to take care of anybody that made it through the door. The next thing I remember was my first flight attendant called me, on our intercom and said, I don't know what's going on, but I just want to let you know we have 4 guys sitting in first class, and it just seems a little strange.
By this time, passengers and crew were frantically dialing family members, telling them they were okay and desperately seeking information.
I got my phone and I spoke to my husband, and he said that was one of you guys. That was a commercial airplane that has just crashed into the building. And I spoke to the captain, and he said, everyone get in your seats, make sure this cockpit, no one comes near it. It's got to be secure.
That's when really mysterious things started happening. According to these TMZ interviews, the flight attendants saw people inside of the plane, even though the plane had been completely cleared and they checked it themselves. Watch.
It was organized pandemonium. We eventually got back to the gate, and we told the passengers that the airport was being evacuated. They were to get their belongings and leave immediately. And of course, they didn't need any encouragement.
They opened the door to let everybody out, and as I'm handing out jackets to passengers in the business class, one passenger asked me, did they get the White House? I said, I would have no idea.
We moved the bags out of the way, and there was a little peephole. I looked through, and the airplane was completely empty. All I saw was a United mechanic waiting for me, and when I opened the door, he says, all right, guys, you'll have to get off the airplane. I've been ordered to lock up the airplane. So we did just that.
As we deplaned, we made sure lavatories were clear, every row was clear. There was not a person left on that plane.
So the plane was empty and locked. The airport was being evacuated. No one knew if Kennedy Airport itself would become a target, so people were scrambling. And that's what made an observation from below extremely suspicious.
People on the ground, baggage people or somebody that worked on the ground there, saw people running in the aircraft.
By this time, the United 23 crew was connecting dots. The person in first class disguised as a woman. The passengers who argued with the flight attendant about taking off quickly without food. The person profusely perspiring in business. The request to enter the cockpit. The reference to terrorists hitting the White House. The 2 mysterious people who were seen in the cabin after the plane was fully empty and the door locked.
It gets even weirder now when all of the flight attendants were brought in by the FBI to a black site and were asked to identify some of the passengers, and some of those passengers were missing. Watch.
The day after, we were all called by FBI telling us that they needed to interview us regarding the incidents of what had happened on the airplane. We ended up getting interviewed by the FBI, and they came to our hotel rooms and individually talked to us. I did tell them that I felt there were some suspicious people on the airplane. And I pointed out exactly the 4 people in first class and 2 gentlemen in business, but the one that had the t-shirt on that had uncontrollable perspiration. I did tell them that.
The first thing they asked me was why the floor hatches were open on the airplane. I know there was a hatch in the floor forward of my seat at door 1 left. I know that hatch led down to the electronics for the cockpit, and the hatch is big enough for a large person to look down in there. About 20 minutes after we left, the agents saw something funny going on the inside of the aircraft, and they'd had somebody board the aircraft, and they found the hatches open in the floors. If the hatches were open, the people could not have gotten off the aircraft because the hatches were just too big to get around. They had to be opened after everyone had gone off the aircraft.
They'd ask questions like if I noticed the rug had been turned up around the hatch by the cockpit. When the SWAT team had come and opened the door, they found that the hatch that goes down into the area where all the equipment is, the electronics and all that, the hatch had been opened.
When I was talking to the FBI and they told me those floor hatches were open, I couldn't breathe. I tried to figure out how those hatches could be opened unless there was somebody down in the electronics area, and they opened it after we left the aircraft.
Maybe somebody was trying to get on the airplane without being noticed, and it could possibly be that there was evidence on the airplane they wanted to get rid of, whether it be box cutters in the seats or knives or weapons. I have no idea, but somebody could have entered the airplane through the electronics bay up into the cabin and removed whatever evidence they wanted to and then simply left the airplane.
Now it gets even more insane with the pilot expressing that perhaps there had been a massive cover-up here, and this was an operation much larger than we ever imagined, with these weapons placed inside of the plane beforehand.
After Kennedy Airport was shut down, authorities searched various airplanes, including the one parked next to United 23, another 767 that was not scheduled to take off during that critical time period.
The chief pilot reported to me that they had found box cutters on the airplane, and it was coincidentally just one number off mine. He asked me the tail number of the airplane I was flying, or the nose number we call. I gave it to him, and he said, "Well, I just want to let you know that we found 2 box cutters in the seat pockets in first class on the airplane next to it, which was the tail number was 1 digit off." If somebody was on the ground cooperating with them, they just simply made a mistake and put the box cutters on a wrong airplane.
My name is Lynn Spencer. I'm a former airline pilot and a flight instructor and an aviation safety investigator. I'm an author of a book about the air events of September 11th. During my research, it was made very evident to me from the highest levels of our government, members of the FBI, senior federal aviation officials, that there were more than just the 4 planes. They also shared with me some of the items that were found on other airplanes that didn't get off the ground on that day. The items that I was told had been found on planes were box cutters, specifically.
I believe that it's a reasonable assumption to think that those box cutters were meant for my airplane, not the one next to me. You have people that clean the airplane, people that load food on the airplane, that have access to the airplane. If somebody was in cooperation with the group, they could have been put there. There are a host of people that have access to the airplane. It wouldn't be the hardest thing in the world to get on an airplane like that. It's the one thing that makes me think that there's a good chance that somebody was plotting to try to use our airplane as a weapon of mass destruction.
United 23 would have become airborne right about the time of the other hijacked aircraft on September 11th. And there's very little doubt in my mind that United 23 was the 5th airplane.
All of this is wild. It seems like a massive federal cover-up. A lot of people are asking a lot of questions about 9/11 right now. We're one of them. I feel like we haven't even remotely gotten the full story here. So many things don't make sense. I think it's time for a new investigation. I think it's time for a new commission. I think President Trump should do that. It'd be good for the country. So much evil happened on that day, and I think we only know maybe 1% of it. It's your boy Benny. Thank you, TMZ, for this report. See you.